Chinese President Xi Jinping has backed Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in his standoff with the West over Ukraine as the two leaders met before the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The Chinese leader urged NATO to stop its expansion towards Eastern Europe. China is watching with growing interest as Russia and the West face off over Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping called for NATO to halt expansion as they met in Beijing. The two leaders, who often align on geopolitical issues, accused NATO of harboring a Cold War ideology even as Russia threatens Ukraine, a former Soviet republic, with the prospect of an invasion. The Kremlin stated that China and Russia oppose further enlargement of NATO and call on the North Atlantic Alliance to abandon its ideologized Cold War approaches, to respect the sovereignty, security and interests of other countries, the diversity of their civilizational, cultural and historical backgrounds, and to exercise a fair and objective attitude towards the peaceful development of other states. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a separate statement said the two leaders had an in-depth and thorough exchange of views on China-Russia relations and a series of major issues that concern international strategic security and stability. The statement also addressed Taiwan, declaring the democratically ruled island part of China and denouncing calls for its independence. The statement from the leaders did not single out any country by name, but the US and Western allies have shown support for Taiwan and have been vocal about rejecting Russia's terms regarding Ukraine and NATO expansion. China said, some forces representing a minority on the world stage continue to advocate unilateral approaches to resolving international problems and resort to military policy. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called Russia's security concerns legitimate, saying they should be taken seriously and addressed. Chinese ambassador to the UN Zhong Jun went further and said outright that China disagreed with the US claims that Russia was threatening international peace. He also criticized the US for convening a meeting of the UN Security Council, likening it to megaphone diplomacy that was not conducive for negotiations. Couched in diplomatic speak, China's official line on the crisis has been cautious and nuanced, stopping short of actual support for Russia using military force against its former Soviet neighbor. Chinese media outlet Xinhua says the US administration has taken three major moves over the crisis on the Ukrainian border. The first is to exaggerate an imminent Russian attack on Ukraine by disclosing relevant intelligence obtained by the US and its allies, revealing so-called evidence of Russia's continued destabilization of Ukraine, and ordering the departure of US staff at its embassy in Ukraine. The second is to beef up the threat of economic sanctions against Russia. The potential sanctions target several large Russian banks and some important financial institutions, and even Russian President Vladimir Putin, in an effort to cut Russia's ties with the Western financial system. The third is to strengthen military deployment within NATO while assisting Ukraine without directly sending troops to the country. Several shipments of weapons have been sent to Ukraine and more military and economic aid has been promised by the United States. Along with showing support for the top issues the two countries are facing with the international community, Putin and Xi Jinping reaffirmed the cordial relationship between the nations. Chinese state media reported Xi Jinping saying in the meeting that the countries strongly support each other in a complex and evolving international situation that involves regional security threats and international strategic stability. Putin said Russia's current close relationship with China is unprecedented and is developing in a progressive way with a spirit of friendship and strategic partnership. Moscow and Beijing also stressed the need to protect the United Nations-driven international architecture and the international law-based world order, seek genuine multipolarity with the United Nations and its Security Council playing a central and coordinating role, promote more democratic international relations, and ensure peace, stability, and sustainable development across the world. Professor Steve Zhang says, China under Xi Jinping has a clear policy of making the world safe for autocrats. And China under Xi Jinping also believes itself to be a leading socialist country now and it has a soft spot for former socialist countries. So, Russia under Putin ticks two boxes that make Russia very deserving of Chinese support. Additionally, Taiwan is China's biggest territorial dispute, and there is a risk of miscalculation as Beijing watches events unfold in Ukraine. Security analyst Julie Norman said, even though there are troop deployments to Eastern European states, no states are talking about directly sending troops into Ukraine itself to defend it. And of course, China's taking note of that, with some of their own territorial disputes in their own areas. Despite their mutual rivalry with the United States, China's and Russia's interests don't always align. China has also invested billions of dollars in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which could be at risk in the event of any conflict. Beijing's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative cuts through several former Soviet bloc states, including Ukraine. A direct rail and ferry freight link opened in 2016, linking China with Ilychivsk port on Ukraine's Black Sea coast via Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan, bypassing Russia. Ukraine is a major exporter of grains to China. By 2025, Beijing and Kiev aim to increase bilateral trade by 50% to $20 billion per year. China has also funded infrastructure projects, including a new metro line for Kiev. If Russia invades Ukraine, Beijing's investments in the region could be at risk. For now, China is showing little concern. Professor Zhang says, the more immediate impact on the Belt and Road Initiative would in fact be the Russian military intervention in Kazakhstan. And the Chinese government has actually shown that they are quite relaxed and comfortable with that. To them, it's more important to support authoritarian states and autocrats to stay in power than for some of them to be closer to Russia than to China. Over the longer term, things may change. In 2014, the Obama administration, without ample prior consultation and discussions, announced its strategic pivot to Asia. China was angered, and many friends and allies were alarmed by the seemingly sudden shift in American policy. China would become the pacing threat for the Obama administration's national security planning. The next two administrations would follow suit. Given Russia's military buildup around Ukraine's borders and Western intelligence forecasts that an invasion may be imminent, surely Moscow is the more clear and present danger for NATO. China only talks about regaining Taiwan by force if necessary. Since China has been identified as the pacing threat for some time, is a review long overdue to assess whether it or Russia best fills that description? 3 questions form the basis for an evaluation. First, what are the specific threats posed by China and Russia to the US and its allies, and how do China and Russia match up against the other in that regard? Second, if China and Russia are indeed co-equal dangers, is the US capable of dealing with both concurrently in all conditions? Third, what should be the appropriate US national security and defense strategies and priorities towards both? Clearly, China's economic growth and increased international assertiveness are areas of major concern. By comparison, Russia, with 1/10 of the population and a fraction of China's GDP, is economically relevant only in the vital energy sphere. But what is often overlooked is that Russia has at least as formidable if not a stronger military than China. Its navy, while numerically smaller, is more capable, especially its nuclear submarine and missile forces. Russia possesses many more strategic and tactical nuclear weapons than China. Furthermore, Russia has more recent combat experience than China in Chechnya, the Middle and Near East, Georgia, and, of course, Ukraine. While China is adept at intellectual property theft, Russia has been more aggressive in cyber attacks and information and influence operations. Its foreign intelligence services have also had greater global experience, including the use of proxies such as the Wagner Group. And Russia exploits past operations and networks once created by the Soviet Union. Therefore, Russia can play a leading role on the opposition against NATO with the support of China.